Oh, I almost forgot though. Some reading updates in the meantime. After finishing the book Thief last week, I immediately jumped into This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. I gave this 3.5 stars. I listened to it, I borrowed it from the Libby app. I love this cover and I just loved the idea of like a gen lit fantasy, which there's a name for. What is that called? Is it just realistic fantasy? I don't know. Anyways, I love this cover so much. I bought it as everything else like a decently long time ago. This is a story about Alice who accidentally finds herself traveling back in time in a Groundhog Day situation from her 40th birthday to her 16th birthday and changing little things every time to see if she could change what her future looked like based on her past self's decisions. Primarily focused on her relationship with her best friend, her romantic relationships, and particularly her relationship with her dad, who is currently sick and getting ready to pass away at the time of her 40th birthday. I thought this was a very sweet book. I think something that, unlike some other things I've tried to read, like is worth your time and your emotionality to read. I don't think it will stick with me for forever, which is its reasoning for a 3.5 versus something higher, but I'm glad that I read it and I'm keeping it on my shelf for now. I tried to read The Pisces. This is highly regarded by a lot of people that I follow on BookTube or whatnot. I've just read so many good reviews of it, and I honestly think that I have been very oversaturated with the Hot Mess Express table at Barnes & Noble. Do you know what I'm talking about? That's like this and Otessa Moshfegh and anything where that narrator is so crass and so extreme that herself and her personality, to me, feels unrealistic. I'm not saying that these people don't exist or that they should be ashamed, but it is just so far away from how I think inside of my head that I find myself finding them unrealistic people and characters, and those aren't the kind of books that I like. I like the most realistic things for the most part, especially when it comes to gen lit. And so this character just wasn't working for me. And so after a decent ways into this book, I decided to DNF and unhaul this. Then on my Kindle, I got in a copy of The Fury by Alex Michaelides from the Libby app. I finished it in less than 24 hours, as I have with both of his other books. I gave it 3.5 stars, which is less than the previous 2 books of his that I read. They were both in my top 10 books of last year, and The Silent Patient was either number 2 or number 3. This one, I liked the world, I liked the general setup and the idea, but I thought the particular narration style of this one was confusing and just didn't generally feel as valid to me as the narrators from the last 2 books. I think it's one of those things that gets an A for effort. I see what Alex was trying to do for sure, but I just didn't find it as easy or as enjoyable or insightful to read, so I'm giving that one a 3.5. And then I'm currently trying to read Mrs. S by Kay Patrick. This was a book that I picked up with Sam at a bookstore before I started my book buying ban. This was like the last book that I bought before my ban started, and I've only bought 2 since then. 2! Isn't that impressive? I know that means that I like broke the ban, but only buying 2 books to add to my gen lit growing pile for the year, that's pretty good. That's pretty good for me. Anyways, this was the last one I bought. We bought it purely based off of the cover and the description that just felt very Kelsey. This is based in an all-girls English boarding school, and a new teacher has come, a young teacher, and she falls in love with an older woman that works at the school. It's dark academia and the age gap forbidden romance thing that I find so interesting, and I think I'm liking it so far. I'm only about 30 pages in, but it's a relatively short book. It's about 230. And I'm finding it's very dense. It's hard to just breeze through, which is my preferred way to read a book. And I really have to sit and nibble on each of the sentences, which I know is probably good for me and like, you know, challenging me and growing my brain, but I'm finding it a little annoying right now. So I am slowly but surely getting through this. So that last clip was from mid-May and it's now the end of June. I have been reading a lot recently, but unfortunately none of it has been off of my TBR, which I have mixed feelings about. I definitely wish, you know, that the last 5 or so books that I read would have been off of my TBR, but I also have to remind myself sometimes, like, not to make myself feel bad or guilty for not reading the books that I have here, because they've all been books from the library, first of all, so it's not like I'm spending money. But then also, like, if you're reading, and the TBR thing is like a made-up challenge that I made for myself. So I'm still trying to tell myself that it's okay, and the goal was also not necessarily to finish my TBR by the end of the year, so I'm gonna be fine. I read Piglet by Lottie Hazell while I was traveling. I gave this one a 3.75. I was intrigued by the cover and just some of the themes of the book, but I do feel like this very much fits into the Hot Mess Express subgenre that a lot of the lit fic books that I've read in the last 2 years, and a lot of the books that have been popular, especially on like TikTok and whatnot, have leaned into. And honestly, I think I'm just a little tired of that narration style. This one had a funky framing device that I don't know how well it worked for me, but the writing was beautiful and the emotions that were behind the writing were very clear and honest. I also, I was listening to a like curated playlist by the Summer I Turned Pretty cast. This was, I think, the Belly playlist that it was supposed to be like what she was listening to while she was trying to get into character. And I Know the End by Phoebe Bridgers came on at like the height of the climax while I was reading, and it was one of those magical moments where like everything just lined up perfectly. And so I have a fond memory of reading this book, and that probably also gave it a little bit of a bump to a 3.75 instead of a 3.5. Overall, I wouldn't dissuade anyone from reading it, but it wasn't my fave. I don't know if it will stick with me for forever. And then I tried something new. I have never been a huge romance reader. I've just never found a book or an author that I felt super connected to outside of like YA. But everyone had been saying wonderful, wonderful things about Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. And so I picked it up from the library originally and read it in less than 24 hours. This is a big book. This is not a little book, and I read it so quickly and was so into it, and then immediately went out and bought it. I gave it a 4.25 and was immediately ready to read more romance books, and was kind of mad that I don't know, I wouldn't say like kept myself from reading that genre. It doesn't come out of like a pretentious place. I just never really knew who or what to get into. So I placed holds for Abby's other 2 books that are in this universe, as well as picked up a few others to try. And now I'm in my romance era, and I have to say I'm loving it. It's very nice to read books where people aren't like killing each other, and we're not talking about like their deep, dark mental state all the time. That isn't to say that this book isn't deep and doesn't have a lot of things to learn from. I think that's probably why I like this so much as compared to a few other romance books that I've tried to read in the past, is that this doesn't give up complexities and like honesty and stuff in order to tell like a light fluffy story, and I appreciate that a lot. So after I finished this one, I picked up The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, also from the library, and read this. This actually, it was funny, this is a lot smaller, and it took me a lot longer to get through than Just for the Summer. But I really enjoyed it as well. I always kind of was interested in it because of the title. I myself am a huge hopeless romantic, and so I really liked the idea behind it. I also liked that this did have some like supernatural elements that could have been turned into like a horror story otherwise, or like a gothic piece of literature, which she even makes jokes about in the book, but instead was turned into something romantic, and not just like relationally romantic, but like a romantic view of life and the things that are thrown at us. So I think I'm gonna give this one a 3.75, I think is my final score of this one, and I definitely think I will try to read The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston as well. And then I read or reread We'll Always Have Summer by Jenny Han, which is the third book in the Summer I Turned Pretty series. Last year I started rereading the series, and I wanted to reread the third one, particularly leading up to the third season coming out. But we now know that the third season is going to premiere next year, which I'm fine with. Everyone's pissed about it, but I think anyone that's read the book thinks that it makes sense to wait for a little bit. But as you'll see in my 24-hour readathon as well, my childhood best friend Katie came and visited, and she was going to read these for the first time. And so this is the book that I hadn't reread in quite some time, and so I wanted to get to it before she did so that I would remember everything so that we could talk about it. So I went ahead and reread it, and I'll probably reread all of these again before the third season comes out. I just love these books. They mean so much to me, and I just think they're sweet, and they reflect so much of who I am, and so much of that came from these books. I'm so excited to see what people think of the third season and the things that are coming. And if you have any interest in this story, whether it's because of the TV show or not, I would highly recommend picking these up. They're easy to read. I could read all of them in one day if I wanted to. And yeah, I love them so much. They mean the world to me. Okay. Right now I'm reading Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and I have a couple of other library books that I want to get through. I do want to get back to my TBR before too long, but I'm trying to not rush myself and enjoy that I am just reading so very much right now. And in other bookish related news, I did, while I was traveling, I got to go to the Strand. Finally, I'm so excited. As well as the 4-story Barnes & Noble in New York while I was visiting my friends. And I finally got a paperback copy of Really Good Actually by Monica Heisey. This was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And I was waiting for it to come out in paperback to buy. And then I also got a paperback copy of The Only One Left by Riley Sager. These were 2 books that I gave myself permission to break my book buying ban for, since I've already read them, and I wanted to buy a book while I was traveling. I think it would have been wrong of me if I didn't go to the Strand and buy a book. So I think that's all of my updates.